Hello and welcome back. Yet another terror attack in Europe. Not using guns this time, it is another stabbing. And this happened in Paris. So as we see from the Daily Mail, terrorist knifeman wearing a fake explosive vest, just like the London Bridge MO, is shot dead in Paris after stabbing 4 people, killing 1 and leaving 2 more critical. So there seems to be a successful manoeuvre as pioneered by the London Bridge attacker to wear a fake explosive vest. Actual explosives are too difficult to get, but seeing as the idea is terror, if you give the illusion of the fact that you will explode once killed, or that you plan to explode very soon, then people tend to be more hesitant in taking you out, and then of course that does create more fear. The French response was not the same as the English in how the English confronted the attacker, but nonetheless they did raise the alarm. So, reading on. The bloodbath took place in the Haute-Brière Park, Vlieuve, in Paris suburbs. It's 4 miles south. Attacker was wearing a mock explosive vest and was shot dead by police. Witnesses claimed he shouted Allahu Akbar during attack which injured 4. 1 has died and another 2 remain in critical condition, the police said. So it seems to be another Islamic terror incident. An alleged terrorist stabbed 1 person to death in Paris this afternoon and wounded 4 others with knives before he was shot dead by police. Witnesses told local media the attacker was yelling Allahu Akbar as he launched the attack. And police said the attacker was wearing an explosive vest, a mock one, and had made off towards a Carrefour supermarket just under a mile away where he was neutralised, shot several times. He died at the scene. He was stabbing randomly. He didn't seem to be targeting anybody in particular. It was just a terror attack, as they say. A police union source said 4 people were attacked by an individual in the Haute-Brière supermarket. The attacker was armed with a knife and was lashing out at anyone he could. The attacker appeared to be wearing an explosive vest, but was not wearing any shoes when he carried out the attacks. Victims were falling down around him, while others raised the alarm. Members of the anti-criminal brigade were first on the scene and shot a number of rounds at the man who was declared dead at the scene. Then a specialist mine clearance team inspected the man's dead body after his death and said it was clear of explosives. So the political response: the French Interior Minister Laurent Nunez and Paris Police Chief Didier Lemaitre later visited the park around 7 miles from the city centre, which is hugely popular with young families, and the mayor said, "In these difficult times, let's remain united and careful." They don't wish to point out the elephant in the room, of course, even though they do have a history of this, as they say. It follows a series of bomb, gun and knife attacks carried out by the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda operatives in France dating back to 2015. The deadliest was in November 2015, with 130 people killed in Paris. Suicide bombers for ISIS targeted the Stade de France, cafes, restaurants and the Bataclan music venue where 90 died. And not just in Paris. Of course there's the Charlie Hebdo, as we all know, is particularly a particularly good example of what Islam stands for. And if you're thinking, oh well, we can't have free speech and we don't want people to be able to speak their mind when it comes to protected characteristics, just like the vegans are trying to do in the UK. They want that to be a protected characteristic where you can't discriminate against them. Well, this is of course how Islam feels as well. In July 2016, 86 people were killed and more than 400 injured when a 19-ton truck was deliberately driven into crowds on the seafront promenade at Nice in the south of France. So of course the response, they were trying to make it more difficult to hire vehicles. I've decided that it's easier to just put in place the anti-Islam barriers, the big concrete girders that you've seen around, I'm sure. And that was a Tunisian immigrant who was shot dead by police. During the same month, 2 ISIS terrorists murdered an 86-year-old Catholic priest during a church service in Normandy, because Christians are infidels as well, as far as they're concerned. Even though it contradicts with the Quran, because the Bible is supposed to be truthful, but then what the Bible says goes against Muhammad being a prophet of God. So it's internally contradictory, but that's to be expected. They say there have been frequent knife attacks on the forces of law and order, leading to the deaths of serving police. In October of this year, a radicalised computer operative working at the Paris prefecture stabbed 4 of his colleagues to death. The attacker, who was also shot dead, turned out to be a Muslim convert who kept extremist Al-Qaeda and Islamic State literature and images on his computer. And prosecutors have opened an inquiry into the latest attack. So as we see, France seems to be suffering quite a lot, and hey, it'll be good once we leave the EU to try and stem that pipeline, cut it off so that they won't be coming into the UK. But as socialism is dying in Europe, and people are becoming more wise to the idea of the damaging effect of immigration, especially when people are coming in and you don't know who they are, and they're using the guise of immigration and refugees and asylum seekers in order to propagate their terrorism, the ordinary people of Europe are deciding that they don't want these people to come into their country, and it creates Eurosceptics as well, but not to such an extent as it's just, we don't want the third world coming in our country, otherwise we will be third world as well. Even Angela Merkel, of course, said that multiculturalism failed, and the thing is that there is now a twin effort in the UK where they're saying, well, as in the Islamists, they don't need terror attacks in the UK because they'll just win out by population. They'll just repopulate quicker than the natives, and then they'll be the majority, and they won't need to terrorise us because they'll be the majority anyway. And then similarly we see Islamic parties, as in political parties, coming up in Europe and increasingly popular because of the demographic replacement, and when they become, and hopefully they don't, but if they ever get any standings in elections and in our democracy, they will abolish it because they want Sharia law. So that will be the end of democracy for us. Not too dissimilar to how Hitler rose to power, as it happens in the 1930s. But as always, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. How can we stop these terror attacks in a more amicable way that even progressives who would call anything racist, they would even try to hinder terrorists coming into our countries? What would be a more amicable way to stop it from happening? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. All I can think of that might have some sort of effect is you want to reduce the welfare and benefits in these countries, and I suppose then you'd have to do it evenly, even though it would be better to say you can't have access to it until you've been in the country for 15 years or born here, simply because then that will force people who come into the country to speak the language of the country and have a job and work, and therefore they'll have to put aside the Islamic influences in order to assimilate into the country, as they will have to once they have a job. And then we can't have any special privileges for anyone or protected characteristics, which is why I'm all for vegans having their own protected characteristic, because that's just accelerationism, and at this point I think that's the only way. Just make it so bad until people say, no, any of these protected characteristics are bullshit, because in the end it's going to be basically all but one, and that's just straight white men, and then we might as well stop. But let me know what you guys think down below, and as always, until next time, have a good one.